did my mock with my mom. I think you have to choose someone who is scarier than any program director, and for me, that is my mom.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast for doctors by doctors. I'm Dr. Michael Jerkins, and today is a special episode commemorating, discussing, somewhat maybe celebrating, I don't know, the time-tested tradition of the MASH. And that is why I'm super excited that we have a fourth-year medical student, not just any fourth-year medical student, but student Dr. Avery Wooten with us. And she has been very public with her journey through medical school and the match so far, the match process on her social media platforms. So I'm very interested to hear her perspective on how things are going with the match, how her journey is, what she thinks about med school and entering into residency. It was a little bit ago that I went through this, so it's nice to hear from the younger generation to get an updated understanding of what things are like for fourth-year medical students now entering the match. So without further ado, let's hop to our interview with student Dr. Avery Wooten. Today on the podcast for Doctors by Doctors, we are joined by student Dr. Avery Wooten, who is a fourth-year medical student at the University of California, San Francisco, who is applying for anesthesiology residency. She graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2022 with a BS in quantitative biology and a minor in chemistry, where she was a Chancellor's Science Scholar. It's pretty impressive. Beyond medicine, Avery loves playing volleyball, dancing, and strategy games. Super interested in that. She's deeply passionate about mentoring the next generation of physicians, which she does through her social media platforms and as a medical school coach with Leland. Avery uses her online presence to demystify the medical journey, share advice for aspiring doctors, and highlight the human side of medical training. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Pretty excited to talk to you. I kind of mentioned in the intro, I went through the match process a little bit ago. It's been a smidge. So it's exciting to talk to someone who's going through it now, who can kind of catch us up and see how things are going. But you're balancing a lot. So my question first is, balancing med school, social media presence, the match. How do you even start your day with all of these tasks?
Well, I start my day like everyone else. Honestly, I'm not really a morning person. So when starting medical school, I had to force myself to be a morning person. And so no special morning routine, but I am big on the to-do list. And so I always have a list of all my tasks for the week. And I like to look at it in the morning and just think about the most efficient way to get all my tasks done.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find yourself on their clinical rotations being one of the first people there on your team specifically? Because that's tough if you're not a morning person.
Usually, yes. I like being prepared, and I feel like I feel more confident the earlier I get there, when I'm able to have all the time I need to pre-round and just feel confident going into rounds, especially early on in my rotation. So yes, I was often there pretty early.
I remember specifically general surgery surgery rotation in my third year. And after about the first day, I was like, I need to get here earlier.
Right.
I would make sure I would beat the intern. That was just a personal goal, maybe a little competitive, but it helped give me more time because I obviously didn't know anything.
Right.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey. So I loved in the intro of you're trying to give back and really demystify what this whole medical education is like for people who are on the outside. But why did you come to care so deeply about that to put so much time into it?
Well, when I was applying to medical school, I was part of the Chancellor's Science Scholarship Program, which I mentioned, or you mentioned. And this program was designed to help underrepresented minorities and women earn higher level STEM degrees. So I had such great mentorship. We were assigned a mentor, and then we also got a lot of near peer mentorship from people that had recently graduated the program and started their MD or PhD program. And so I feel very fortunate to have that experience. And I really think that that program really allowed me to go straight through and be so successful in my application process. And so I really wanted to give back for that reason. And with social media, it started out because a lot of people in the program had messaged me asking me how I did it. How did I go straight through to medical school and what that timeline looked like? And I got tired of responding to all those messages individually. And so eventually I started filming videos and would send the link to the video whenever people asked me questions about the process. And so that's where it all started.
Wow. Walk us through how you branched from that to social media.
I started out with just a lot of pre-med advice, and so it was mostly a Q&A. Someone would ask me a question or, leave a comment, and I'd reply to that comment with answers to that portion of the pre-med journey. And then, I realized a lot of the value in my page and from the feedback I received was people really enjoyed seeing what it looked like to, go through pre-med and what medical school looks like. And so I sort of shifted to following my journey through medical school and talking about things like what learning in the clinical environment looks like, or step 1 and 2 studying, or just a day in the life of a medical student.
Yes, it is so crazy, right? Especially when you go home for the holidays or you're around people who aren't in med school, which it's nice sometimes
Yeah,
to take a break. And like they really just have no frame of reference of even what this thing is. And then you get into residency and they keep asking you how school is. You're like, whoa, whoa, it's not school.
yeah, yep,
Let me just clarify. But that just again like demonstrates it's just a weird topic that if you don't have really exposure to, it just is really confusing, I think.
exactly. Yeah.
So let me ask, if you weren't in med school now, what would you see yourself doing instead?
I get this question a lot, and I probably answer it differently every time I'm asked it. But it would be, maybe one of three things. So either I would go the athletic route. I've always been an athlete, and even now I still play volleyball competitively. And I like to dance for fun, either learning TikTok dances or going to dance classes in the city. And so I could see myself being a professional volleyball player or dancer. If I was doing something maybe more practical, I would be a motivational speaker, because a lot of that is what I'm already doing on social media, really encouraging people through the process of becoming a physician. And so I think that's a natural next step for me.
I love that. And you kind of can do a lot of that stuff anyway. That's the fun thing about being a doctor is like you can actually do lots of different things. And okay, so you like obviously now almost done with med school, which is kind
Yeah.
of probably weird to hear. Um, and you've gone through the preclinical and now the clinical rotations and going through the match. Like, what stereotypes about med students or residents is actually true?
I would say we will do anything for free stuff. That is fully true. Put free food at the event. We'll be there. If you give us a gift card for filling out a survey, we'll do it happily. So, we're suckers for free stuff.
That is true. Do you, at your program, do the students have to eat after the residents, or do you guys just first come, first serve for like noon report or things?
Oh, first come, first serve.
Okay. In my med school, it was weird. I always felt kind of like the med students had to wait till all the residents ate first.
Interesting.
I was a little like put off by it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But then as a resident, when I was always late to noon conference because I had to return a page or see a patient or something, and there was no food, I was like, man,
Yeah.
I kind of saw it now from a different angle.
That's fair.
So going through this whole process, can you share a moment when you realize like, wow, I'm actually really doing this. I am a med student. Is it in clinic, as an OR, like you're really feeling like this reality of, man, I'm going to be a practicing doctor one day.
Yeah, I think a lot of the hands-on procedural moments are the things that really excite me. And so one that stands out is when I delivered a baby during my OB-GYN rotation. And I also got to suture the vaginal lacerations after the delivery. And I just remember thinking after that whole process, like, wow, I actually know how to do some things. Like I've learned some things and I can apply it. And I really enjoyed working with the midwives because they're always excited to have medical students, and we got a lot more of a hands-on experience there. So that was one of many moments.
That's amazing. Yeah, I was similar. Our program had a really hands-on experience, especially in trauma surgery, a big trauma surgery program, and the med students just kind of by way of they needed a lot of clinical help just with people there in the trauma ER. And so there were times where we were doing procedures or things with the resident or and you're like, wow, like I kind of actually know how to do something
Right.
instead of just taking a test and getting the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
In a lot of your videos, you are great at delivering the content, but also being funny, which is great.
Thank you.
Have you actually used humor in the middle of a stressful like clinical rotation? And if so, how did that go?
All the time, but I also think our entire team would use humor to get through things, especially on internal medicine, and especially between the medical students and residents. And so, we would always have music playing in the workroom. We'd have fun check-in questions before rounds. And what I really remember is when there was attending that would repeat the same phrases over and over or have the same gestures, we would make a bingo card for that attending and work on filling it out throughout the week. So that was always fun.
I feel like I've been on the other end of that bingo card, but yes, that is a fun exercise. I love that. I want to talk about the match here in a minute, but I also want to zoom out a little bit and get your perspective on a few things from your perspective as someone earlier in your career. And there's been a lot of talk recently about what the older generation of doctors is like and the younger generation of doctors is like, and these stereotypes. Do you think the younger generation of med students is less motivated or more motivated or just differently motivated compared to the previous generations of med students?
Yeah, I would say maybe differently motivated. I think with the way the cost of living has risen disproportionately to the salaries, and us growing up during a pandemic as well, I think we're more focused on flexibility with our time. And, even with a doctor's salary, it's especially in California, at least in the desirable neighborhoods in California, it's very difficult to buy a house. And so, especially without generational wealth. And so, I think financial stability is much more difficult for us to achieve. And so, for that reason, we really care about how we're able to use our time.
I totally agree with that. That makes total sense. And it's also one of these timeless thing of every generation thinks the one after them doesn't work as hard, like no matter what
Yeah.
it is or what time or whatever. And it's kind so you kind of have that, but also, like you said, I mean, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, going to medical school and residency financially was a very different situation.
Yeah.
Granted, 25% of med students don't have any debt. I was not one of those, but a lot of people, it's like, man, just even understanding the amount of debt that they have to pay back,
Yeah.
that really weighs on you. At least it did for me. And so I think, therefore, there's a lot of these kind of financial influences that just make it totally different. It makes a lot of sense. And like, so when I interviewed for residency, it was all in person, which kind of stunk because you had to fly around. It was very expensive. How do med students stand out now if most interviews are virtual and with social media? Like, how do med students stand out in this day and age during interviews?
Honestly, I don't think it's any harder to stand out now. I think, if anything, it's easier to access the information that you need to be prepared and do well in an interview. But I think maybe because of social media, people are more comfortable with sharing their personal story. And, that's really the way you stand out during an interview. It's all about how you can sell yourself. And so I think, if anything, maybe it's a little bit easier with all the practice that we get through social media, of, sharing our personal story. And then also all the information is out there for us to learn from other people who have gone through this process already.
Makes sense. Now, how do you then understand what the program culture is like when you can't necessarily be with the co-residents or current batch of interns in their kind of day to day?
That part is hard. I think they do a good job with the virtual Q&As, and sometimes they'll do virtual tours too to try to really paint a picture of what their program looks like. I think it's helpful to chat one-on-one with residents too. A lot of them are very kind and will offer up their email and or phone number and be willing to answer any questions, but it's definitely hard to get a sense of the culture when you're not there.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I've heard is some people will go in person later for like second looks just to kind of see. And is that something that you see a lot of your classmates doing to try to get a better feel for culture?
Yeah, a lot of people will be going. Usually it's January is when a lot of the second looks will happen.
Gotcha. So in this preparation for the match and residency, what is one piece of advice or kind of preconceived notion about this time that you think is actually totally wrong, if any?
Well, I think a question that I get a lot is about, what type of experience is going to be most important for your residency application? Is it research or is it, volunteering or leadership experiences? And I think there really is no one experience that is going to set you apart from others. And it's, ultimately about how passionate you are about the things that you're doing and how you're able to articulate that. And so, for example, I listed my social media as one of my most meaningful activities. So that's actually what I get the most questions about. And I'll get some research questions too, and questions about my mentorship in general. But, whatever you're passionate about and what you're talking about through your activities and your personal statement, that's what the program will be excited about.
Makes sense. Walk us through your interview preparation. What does that look like? What does your residency interview preparation look like?
I definitely did a mock interview before my first interview. And if I had a longer break, I probably would have done another one, but I'm really using all of the interviews before that as more mock interviews. And so I did my mock with my mom. I think you have to choose someone who is scarier than any program director, and for me, that is my mom. And she's very serious about preparation. She back in elementary school, she would have me present practice for her my presentations, and this is like third grade, and I would do it again and again until it was perfect. So she is the person you want to do a mock interview with. So definitely practice like it's the real thing. I also would do a lot of research on the program, either through the website or any videos or other materials that the program sent, because you really want to get a very specific reason for why that program. And even talking to either medical students that you know that rotate at that program, or any residents that you know, to get a good sense of what rotations are like there, and what it feels like to actually practice in that environment. Those are the big things. And then as far as like preparing for questions, there's different resources. AMC has some practice interview questions. For anesthesia specific questions, ASA had some questions on their website as well. And so I would just shuffle through questions and randomize them and practice a few questions a day.
That's great. What a resource you had for your mom to be able to do that. That's amazing. What are some of the things that have surprised you most about residency interview process?
I think there are some things that surprised me positively and negatively. The positives are, as far as the interview format, for medical school, you would have fewer longer interviews, so I might have 2 1-hour interviews. I like that in residency, at least for me in anesthesia so far. They've been a lot of very short interviews, so I might have 6 15-minute interviews instead. And so it's fun talking to a lot of different people, and I feel like you get a sense of the culture of that program in that 15 minutes with different people, and faculty members and chief residents. And so I like the format of residency interviews. There are long days. The days are longer than I expected because they try to pack a lot in. Sometimes you'll have to go to that program's morning report or noon conference like within the interview day. There's going to be a Q&A with residents usually. They'll have the program director do a little 30-minute to 1-hour presentation about the program. And so you might end up sort of being on the hook for 6 hours, and there's breaks in between, but it can be exhausting to, be in that process for so long.
That is really long. That is a long time to be on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Wow. Well, in the residency interview, how do you think applicants can best communicate their fit with the program? Because like you said, you're trying to sell yourself too. How can you best do that in that virtual interview?
I would say, first and foremost, be honest. I think it's important to highlight things about the program that really do resonate with you, because it's obvious if you barely did any research throughout medical school and you say, the strength of their research is your favorite thing about the program, that's going to look suspicious to residency programs. So be honest with what things really do interest you in that program. And then I would say second, be very specific. And so, as I mentioned before, draw on either your personal experiences or experiences of classmates that have done rotations at that site. Talk to residents and learn their specific why they went to that program. So anything you can do to really prove that you've done your research about that program and you understand them beyond the website.
Do people recommend now to do thank you notes after the interview?
Yeah. Man, I hate a thank you note after the interview, I must say, because I think it's really performative. Obviously, I am grateful for the opportunity to interview, but you have to have a lot of strategy as far as to make it very specific and make sure you're not writing the same generic thank you note to everyone. So I would say yes, write them still, unless a program specifically says, hey, we're going to thank you right here. You can thank us here. Don't write us a thank you note. And sometimes that does happen. And I really appreciate those programs. So thank you for that.
Yes, you're right. I mean, like, and also too, you want it to sound authentic, and it's tough to write a thank you note to however many people you're interviewing with and make it sound authentic and not performative, to your point. And the people receiving it know, I mean, they know. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And like going through this now, I already mentioned it's very different from when I did this, which was before COVID, which kind of initiated a lot of the changes. How do you see the residency interview and application process evolving over the next, say, 4 to 5 years? Any changes you predict?
I think hopefully they stay mostly virtual. It seems like people enjoy that format just for the ease and, as you mentioned, the financial component of having to pay to fly to all of these programs for interviews. And sometimes there are just other scheduling conflicts where I can schedule interviews back to back, usually not in the same day, but at least the day after each other, whereas you can't really do that with in-person interviews sometimes. So I would say I'm thinking it'll stay virtual. I think maybe they're still tweaking the signaling process, and it's still very new. And it seems like every year they're making small changes as to, offering gold versus silver signals and how many. And I think they're still trying to figure out the best way to use signals in a way that no one is wasting applications, because I think no program wants to be your 40th school as a backup. And it's also helpful for the applicant when you're using the signals more strategically and you're not having to spend as much money on applying so broadly.
That is the craziest thing about this whole thing to me is just how much money people, that's another thing people don't understand if you haven't gone through it. It's like how much money it is for you to do the thing you have to do to advance in your medical career
Exactly.
and the economics of it. And whatever, I'm not trying to go for too much on a rant.
No, I get it.
It's just crazy. Like I did some back then napkin math once of just like how much debt cumulatively did my graduating medical school class get from just residency applications and how much interest is accrued annually just on this. And it is crazy. And I don't have a solution other than just to make it free, but that's not really my purview. But it's crazy, right? It's crazy how much it costs.
And it's the things you don't think about. So, I anticipated, paying to register for step one and step two. Applications will cost money, but even for certain rotations, when I had to go across the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge and pay for the toll every time I drive and the gas money, like all the little things add up.
Yes. And then you get to residency, and sometimes you have to pay to park.
Yes. And as a medical student, sometimes you have to pay to park as well. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So do you ask questions like that on the interviews? Do you get that granular, like, hey, y'all, I know this is not like the most major thing, but do I have to pay to park at your program?
Yes, in the Q&As that are specifically residents only, they'll even say, "Look, no one with any power is here today. This is just residents. Ask us anything." And that's where you can ask, "Hey, is the food good? Do we pay for parking? What's the meal stipend look like? All of that."
You get a little bit more transparent or real with their answers. I appreciate that. So let me ask you this. If you could send any type of, I know you've sent a lot of videos out to future med students or pre-meds. If you could send out a message to all the pre-meds out there that are looking to get into med school next fall, what would your piece of advice be to those people?
My piece of advice, I would say, this is as far as once you're in medical school, is that medical school does not need to be your whole life, and you need to take care of yourself first, but also be prepared to work hard, because nothing worth having in life comes easy. And I think sometimes people will see me really enjoying myself in medical school on social media and think it's, dishonest, or that I'm misrepresenting medical school as being easy. And trust me, I have never said that medical school is easy, but I do fully believe that medical school can be challenging and enjoyable. And, I don't love medical school despite it being challenging. Part of the reason I enjoy medicine is because of that challenge.
What is one thing you would change about medical school if you could?
I would change the game that medical students have to play about not asking to leave rotations. I think, we have to pretend that we wouldn't rather be at home than in the hospital. And I think that's fine. I think even if you love your job, you like to go home after a hard day's work. And I think there's no need to pretend that we'd rather be in the hospital than at home. And I think, oftentimes your attending or senior resident might forget about you. And so you're sitting there, and I've had tons of moments where someone came in hours later and said, "Oh, Avery, you're still here? Yeah, get out of here." But you can't ask to go home. So I think we should just end the game.
How do you end it though? You're right. That is exactly what happens. You just forget. I've been that person. But how would you end the game? You just have like a, I don't know. How would you do that?
There's an expectation that, or medical students feel the pressure of, if you ask to leave, that you'll be seen as not as interested, or just even if you say, "Hey, my work's all done, can I head out now?" I just think we have to take the pressure off. And I have known people that got bad evals because of asking to go home, even when they had finished their task for the day. So I think it starts with just changing that culture behind, having to always perform.
I think the way I used to get asked I appreciated was, what else do you need me to do for you?
I use that one a lot.
Yes. And then you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm good. You can go. Because the residents have been there. They were med students. They had the same thing they had to navigate. Now, some of them want to like put you through the awkward situation they had to go through. But I think most of us are like, yeah, yeah.
The worst is when you say you can head out if you want. Well, now what do I do with that? Because because I do want, but I don't want you to know that I want.
You're right. I don't. You're like, now that you bring it up, I don't want to. I actually want to sit here and watch you work in the workroom. And then that would be great. No, you're right. That is a funny one. It's like when your parents are like, you can go do this thing, but it'd be very disappointing if you did, but it's up to you.
Right.
So, okay. I hate to keep going back to this, but do you think the younger generation of doctors are less financially incentivized to pursue medicine than older generations?
I would say definitely yes, less incentivized, and yet we're still doing it. So I don't know, we're motivated by our love for the field, I guess. But as far as financial motivation, I mean, it's becoming harder and harder to get loans to even be able to attend medical school. And there's just a lot of stats that say that wealth is a bigger predictor of who ends up becoming a doctor than anything else. And so I think we are less incentivized. Money just does not go as far as it used to. And, there's a lot of debt to dig your way out of for a lot of people. And yet, people are very excited about this field still. And so, I'm glad to see that there's still so much interest. And even with knowing that at the end of all this, there's not enough spots as far as matching in a residency. So, even then, even knowing you can go through all this and apply to match and potentially not match, people are still working towards that goal.
I love that. I think it's a great point, right? So it's that, hey, 20 years ago, the debt to income ratio or the return on investment was a lot higher for physicians than it is now. Yet we still have tons of people applying for med school, tons of people not getting into med school, tons of people trying to match, and some unfortunately not. To your point of like, how many of those older generation of doctors would still go through it now, knowing the financial reality is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully I don't get too many angry emails for that. But no, I totally agree. Well, we're gonna wrap this up with some rapid fire. It's not really questions, a true false statement. So I say a statement. You tell me if you think it's true or false. It almost is never rapid, because I always want to talk more about it.
Can I elaborate, or do I just get true or false?
You can totally elaborate. Yes, yes. And I normally will ask a question anyway, but all right. True or false? Burnout is inevitable in medical school.
True, but so I think it's hard to avoid ever feeling burnout in medical school. There will definitely be a hard rotation or just an exhausting block, but your medical school experience does not have to be defined by burnout.
Love it. True or false? Hobbies and extracurriculars matter more than grades when programs decide who to interview for residency.
False. I would say they matter equally. You do have to prove that you're academically capable. And I mean, grades means a lot of things in medical schools as things are pass fail, but at least as far as your evals and getting honors on your rotations. So that's important. But I would say it's equally important to have activities that you're passionate about.
True or false? Humor is essential in med school.
True. Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten through rotations without humor, and it was really great because I actually rotated with one of my closest friends in medical school because we got to preference who we partnered up with. Oh, it was so much fun.
It makes a lot of difference. A lot of difference. It's like funny the gunner mentality and stuff in med school, and unfortunately, I'm sure it still exists. And we're like incented to do that, unfortunately, with some of this bad behavior to get honors on these clinical rotations and things. But I remember one of my rotations in med school where a classmate, it wasn't to me, but a classmate co-signed another classmate's note and like wrote an addendum to it on their a different patient. And I was just like next level, where I'm like, that is amazing.
Right.
I don't even know how, I didn't even know you could do that, but they found a way to co-sign someone else's note and like correct them in the record so the attending could see. I was like, wow, wow, unheard of. Hopefully I didn't give anybody ideas.
Right. We don't need that.
Don't need that. True or false? The most competitive specialties are actually the ones with the worst work-life balance.
False. Maybe for some, but I think Durham is always really competitive, and they seem to be living life over there. I think anesthesia is getting more competitive for the same reason. So overall, false.
I agree. So derm is an exception to that. And you said anesthesia. Are there any others? I'm trying to think.
There are some others that might be starting to get more competitive because people are catching on to the lifestyle, like PM&R. I think radiology. Um, yeah, but I do see the point. There is like neurosurgery, for example, that is very competitive.
The surgical subspecialties.
Yeah, either based on the like number of spots available or lifestyle, it makes it competitive.
Makes sense. True or false? Mentors influence your match outcome more than your CV.
Maybe it could be true or false. It is a tough one. I am a big believer in your network taking you places, but I do think you have to back it up with your credentials. So I think a mentor can get your foot in the door, but you still have to prove yourself. So I don't know. I think they're kind of equally important, but both matter a lot.
Totally agree. That's why I made this one tough. That was a tough one. All right. Last one. True or false? Virtual interviews level the playing field for applicants.
Definitely true. Yeah, I would say I think the like barrier that's mentioned about virtual interviews is it being more difficult to sort of convey energy and emotion through the screen, but especially Gen Z, I think we have no problem with that. Like we grew up on social media and we grew up talking through screens, and so I think the benefits definitely outweigh the negatives. You have access to all this, to information. You can have notes in the background and bullet points, have your resume in the background if you forget the topics you want to mention. There's not the financial barrier of having to fly to places. So yeah, definitely level the playing field.
And all the debt. You don't have to get in more debt for all the traveling. That's great. Well, I always wrap up our interviews with one question we ask every guest, and that is, what is one thing that you've changed your mind about recently?
TV is better than reading. That's what I used to think, but I've been reading a lot lately, especially having more time in my fourth year. And I forgot how much I love reading. When I find a good book, I really cannot put it down. And I would say I'd rather watch a bad TV show than read a bad book, but a 10 out of 10 book is definitely better than a 10 out of 10 TV show.
Does listening to audiobooks count as reading?
Not for me. I feel like so I have trouble with when there's just audio and no visual. Like I realize I start tuning it out and I don't even know I'm doing it. So I think I need the physical copy of a book, but you don't get the same feeling as you do when you're reading a book. I don't know, because you read things in your own tone and your own voice, and I don't know. I think you give characters a different life than when you have an audiobook.
And what is the best, you started to talk about TV shows, but what is the best medical TV show that you watch?
The Pit.
Everyone says that. I haven't watched it yet. I need to.
You gotta watch The Pit.
Everyone says it's the most accurate.
It is. And they still make it interesting. I think it's hard to balance an accurate medical TV show, but also cater to a non-medical audience, and they do that very well.
Okay, I guess I have to go watch it now. Where can people find you and follow your journey through medical education?
Oh, I'm on both TikTok and Instagram. On Instagram, I'm Aves, Aves dot the dot MS4. TikTok's the same thing, but with an underscore after it because someone stole my username. It's all right.
What are you going to do when you're a resident and you're not an MS4 anymore?
It's going to change, but I'm not going to tell you what it's going to change to because you're going to steal it.
I won't. No, secret safe with me. We won't tell anybody. Well, student Dr. Avery Wooten, best of luck on the match. I'm sure you're going to do great. Thank you for sharing your time with us and sharing your journey with all these folks out on social. And we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us this episode, and you can catch the podcast for Doctors by Doctors on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all the other major podcasting platforms. If you enjoyed this episode or learned anything here today, please take a moment to give us a rating and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode release. To submit topic suggestions or guest suggestions or questions, you can reach us at podcast@panaceafinancial.com. As always, thanks for listening, and the next time you see a doctor, maybe you should prescribe them this podcast. See you next time.